Professor Adam Habib has called time on his career as Wits University Vice-Chancellor. He's accepted a role in London as the Director of the School of Oriental and African Studies, or SOAS as it's more popularly known. After more than 8 years in Braamfontein, Habib says this has been more than just a job. Well, he joins me now to reflect on his time at the institution. Good evening. Thank you so much for your time. I guess part of the conversation is a bit premature because you only leave in December, so I guess the full reflections will take place then, but just perhaps your state of mind in making this decision. You've been very intentional about letting the country and Wits University know that you haven't taken it lightly.
Yeah. No, so I would say that it's a very emotional moment. Yeah. It's a very poignant moment for me. I've always said that Wits is more than a job. It's a passion. I think that this country cannot correct the disparities of our past, cannot create a more inclusive society without Wits University and the university system more generally playing a role. And so for me, it was important to create a transformed institution, but also an excellent and world-class institution. And I think that was always why Wits was so special for me. It was why it was so important to me. And I think to the country as a whole. And so it wasn't an easy decision. The decision is largely because I'm in my second term. In 2.5 years after December, I am going to have to leave. And the big question is, where will I go? And so I emerged and said, would you think about coming over as director? And it was an opportunity at this time.
Sure, it certainly is good news to you, and big congratulations for that. It's interesting because in this letter that you have written, you've highlighted some of the achievements that the university has been able to get through under your tenure. At the same time, you've said you don't think politicians or even activists would agree that you've done a good job. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, you know, I'm fairly vocal about the opportunism of our politicians. And I'm not only talking about members of the opposition party like the EFF. I also think that there's large members of the DA and frankly the ANC that have been utterly opportunistic. Yeah. In Fees Must Fall, I found it particularly evident. Because what you had is a whole series of politicians who set the rules, and then they go on ANC or EFF or other platforms and then actually blame the universities and the vice-chancellors and the higher education executives for a whole series of actions that those rules in the first place created. Sure. You've had political leaders in universities manipulating issues and taking instructions from the outside. I've said on record, I think that our student politics is too party aligned, that it should be more principally organized. I find it really problematic. You don't see in Harvard or Oxford or Cambridge political parties competing for the SRC elections. You see them in South Africa. And that's a problem because it destroys our public institutions.
So to the extent that part of what happens even in institutions of higher learning is almost a microcosm of what we see in broader society, do you think that that is possible when you look at South Africa and how we interact and even engage with politics in this country?
Well, I think that the way we engage with politics has become very destructive. Look at every major survey, and society's attitudes towards politicians is actually they have very little trust in politicians. And if you see the kinds of gamesmanship that's played in a place like Parliament, it's an utter embarrassment that these people call themselves political leaders. And that's true also of the universities. Look at how many SRCs get good turnouts in election. The vast majority of students say, these guys have nobody else's interested out. This is all political rhetoric. It's a game to get a job in Parliament, to get a job in the state structures. Frankly, I think South Africans are really full of political activists and politicians. These guys are dishonest. They lack integrity. They compromise our public institutions. And those public institutions, whether I'm talking about universities or whether I'm talking about Parliament, are necessary for our future. Our children have to be trained in those universities. Yeah. And these people who are playing games, when people burn buildings in KwaZulu-Natal, when people shut down campuses and violate the rights of all of the students, this is unacceptable. And it shouldn't be vice-chancellors that rise to the defense. We as a collective society must say, enough is enough. You play ball or actually get out And I think that we should be saying to all of these political activists and politicians. And I think we must be frank about it.
Sure. Opportunism on the one hand, but of course on the other, there are very real concerns about the plight of students that for years seem to have been raised and gone relatively unattended to, and thus you have this melting point and this conflation of issues. So opportunism is one, but one aspect of it.
So let's ask the question, yes, there are legitimate complaints. The question is, if we want free education in the society, who does that? Look anywhere in the world. Germany has recently done it. Mexico has done it. All of the places where it gets done, it doesn't get done in universities. It gets done by government policy. Now, why are you actually paralyzing the universities themselves? If you really believe this, I said to the students a couple of weeks ago, I said, if you really do want to take up the issue of free education, then do take it up. Take it up at Parliament, take it up at government, take it up at the union buildings. You don't do it by destroying buildings. You don't do it by violating the rights of others. That's where the question is. If we think that there's an issue of inequality in our society, universities can't address that. That has to be done by government policy. It has to be done by choices we as a nation make. And it seems to me that's what should be. If you want to ask whether our universities succeed, if you want to ask me, how do you judge Wits? You shouldn't be judging me whether Julius Malema or Floyd Shivambu likes me or Blade Nzimande. You should judge me by how many graduates you produce. Sure. How much research do you do? Is the place financially sustainable? How well did you do on transformation? And on every one of the indicators, we shut the lights out. That's the point I'm saying. Judge us like universities get judged anywhere in the world, not by what political line I carry or whether I belong to a certain political party. That's not my job. And frankly, I don't care whether politicians like me or not.
It's been interesting because somebody that you would have engaged extensively with while at Wits is the former student leader, Mcebo Dlamini. I'm not sure if you've seen some of the comments that he's had to say. Surprisingly, not all of it has been bad. In fact, he's saying he thinks you're leaving some projects hanging and that you should stay on and complete it. I think part of it is also telling of the kind of, the word I'm looking for is tumultuous relationship that you have, even with activists that are within institutions, that it's not always bad and that it seems to be a give and take at any given point.
It always has been. And I've always had a good relationship with many of the student leaders. I must say that I do worry about both student leaders and politicians. They often say one thing in front of cameras and another thing in front of... I wrote about this in my book, where people will come and say, you like my father. Mcebo once said to me, you like my father. I really love you. And then he would say something else. So we have to be able to distinguish between what happens in the public and what happens in the private. I do worry about this. Because what has been learned in South Africa by a whole new generation of people, they learn the politics from people like Julius Malema and Jacob Zuma. And so they think you say one thing in public and you say another thing in private. Yeah. And the danger about that is that our politics then lack integrity. And frankly, that's what worries me. Our politics truly lacks integrity. If you speak to South African the public, they have a very low opinion of politicians, in part because they think these people lack integrity. If we want to fix our society, if we want to fix our public institutions, we need to bring back integrity into politics. And I think that's this important thing.